The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. You know, today I have a guest on who I've had on many times, and there's a reason for it, because he's such an interesting guest. You know, Michael was a former NYPD investigator and the best-selling author, and he remains a best-selling author. And today he's going to be talking about his books because they are so interesting. That's what got me started with Michael, because I read one of his books and I found it fascinating. And my husband did too. And we said to each other, we've got to get this guy on the show. And here he is today. So let's talk a little bit about your books. You know, did you have a specific reason too, right?
Well, I don't know if there's a specific reason, Susan. I just, there's just so many things that I want to discuss, and I want people to know what my opinions and my background is. So I put it all down on paper. And
yeah.
Before I know it, it's 200-300 pages long.
Yeah, and I know. And the interesting thing is that you use a specific technique for writing. Could you explain to our audience what that is?
Well, I guess it goes back to the fact that I like to tell stories, and I write in a conversational tone, which keeps my readers engaged, believe it or not, because I write as though I'm sitting there talking to you, and I use a lot of dialogue in my writing, especially more so in my fiction than my nonfiction. In my nonfiction, it's a lot of educational stuff and a lot of really useful information, and there's some opinion, in there too, but it works out that way. But it's funny because I never saw myself as a writer. When I tell you a story, when I was in high school, I was what was known as a super senior. It took me 4.5 years to get out of a 4-year school, and my friends were going off to college and I wasn't. I don't know what I wanted to do. I tried a community college for a couple of months, one semester, and I said, this isn't for me. And I joined the police department and got promoted after 8 months, and promoted a second time and became a detective in the Organized Crime Control Bureau with Narcotics Division. And then I was temporarily assigned to the Intelligence Division. I was fortunate enough to meet some of the most powerful people in the world. I was the bodyguard for the Shah of Iran, Madam Chang of Taiwan. I met 4 U.S. presidents, Ford, Nixon, Reagan, and Carter. And went on from there, and then I retired after 15 years in the police department, went into corporate finance and management, because by this time I went back to school, and while I was in the department, I achieved an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in public and business administration. And because I knew if I wanted to make something of myself after I left the department, I better do that right. And then so I went into business for 18 years, sold that, moved to Florida, and scratched my head and said, what am I doing here? So I wrote a business book I always wanted to write. Nobody wanted to publish it, so I self-published it. I said to myself, I built a very successful business on my own from scratch. What's the big deal about marketing a book? Boy, was I wrong. So it was a business book on disruptive technology in the digital age, called the Success by Default: The Depersonalization of Corporate America. There's no relationships left in business anymore since the internet. And I didn't know how to market it. So I wound up sending a copy to every business magazine I knew. And about 7 months later, I get a fat check in the mail from my publisher. And it turns out, I said, what's going on with this? She says, you haven't checked Amazon lately. I looked at Amazon. The book would hit number 22 on the bestseller list. What had happened is all the magazines I sent it to, Forbes read it. An editor at Forbes read it and said it belonged on the desk of every CEO in America. And not only did that launch me into the bestseller status, but also I was getting calls from corporations all over the country, and how I do motivational speaking for corporations and sales training and such. So that's how my writing career started. And then 2 years later, I wrote an expose on where politics in America has gone over the last 100 years. And that was titled, Where Did My America Go? And the cover was really intriguing because it had a shattered American flag on it. And I basically talked about how politics has changed over the last 100 years. And in the last chapter, believe it or not, I paraphrased Harry Beale from the movie Network, and I said, well, maybe it's time we have another Tea Party and we take America back. And that was in 2006.
Now, I want to interrupt you, Michael, because that is so relevant today, that book. If you think about what's happening all around the country, all around the world, you realize that book was very relevant to today. How did you figure that out? You must have had like a wave going through your mind and saying, this is going to happen for many, many years to come.
Well,
so,
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go. No, please go ahead.
I don't know if I was, if I had a crystal ball or anything else, but if you look at the chapters in that book, there's one on education, there's one on intelligence and political correctness and everything else. All you got to do is take the book and change the name of the characters. Nothing's changed. It's gotten worse. One of the things I say in the book is that America, no matter what party you're in, Republican, Independent, Democrat, it really doesn't matter. The problem with our government is we don't have any long-range plans. We never did. You go to China and Russia, they've got these 20-year economic plans and these 15-year plans and these 10-year plans. We have a 4-year plan. Who's ever president today has the agenda for the next 4 years. And as soon as he leaves office and a new president comes in, there goes a new agenda. They throw out the old and start. I mean, not that I'm patting Trump on the back, but my God, look what the man did. We became energy independent in 2 years. We've shut down the borders. The stock market was going nuts. People were back to work. The only thing that really hurt us was COVID. There's nothing, nobody could predict that. It happened. And Biden comes in and he's in office 24 hours and he shuts down the pipelines. He stops the drilling on public lands. We're not in energy independent anymore. He's now looking to buy energy from our enemies, Russia, Iran, Venezuela. Give me a break. We were, the country that controls the energy supply in this world is the leader economically all over the world. That's a fact.
Yes. And I want to say this much. All of this that you're talking about is really happening right now. And it makes this world not even a better place. It makes it a worse place. But today we're talking about your books. So I want to get back to that. Sure. Now, the book that I read had to do with your father. And it seemed that your father had so much influence on you. And that was the book that I loved. So would you tell the audience a little bit about that book and why did you write it?
Well, that book was success by default. My dad worked for a plumbing contractor who had over 900 men on a payroll. My dad was his lead foreman. My dad was responsible for both towers of the World Trade Center, as far as the plumbing was concerned. It was his responsibility to make sure that every faucet ran and every toilet flushed and every fire extinguisher every fire line was going to work and all of that. And they had 900 men on a payroll on that job. It was an amazing job. That's the work he did. But all he was basically a plumber. But when you come down to it, he had a philosophy in life that was unbelievable, and he passed it along to me. He was a simple man, but what he did was he taught me how to treat people, and that was very important. He also taught me how to turn lemons into lemonade. Dad grew up on a farm until he was about 22 years old, and he had to leave because his father sold the farm because his father had tuberculosis. Anyway, he really taught me everything I need to know. And what he used to say, they had an apple orchard on the farm and he loved apples. And he used to say to me, he says, you got to look at life as a barrel of apples. He said, reach in and grab one. If it comes up rotten, don't throw it away. He'd say, take the seeds and plant them, grow another tree. And if it's got a worm in it, take the worm and go fishing. And that was his philosophy in life, was how to turn lemons into lemonade. And then he taught me how to be charitable, because he said, when you grow that tree, and you fill up that barrel again, he said, you're not going to be able to eat all those apples. So learn to give some away, take care of the less fortunate. And basically that's what he taught me. And that's what I did. And when I became successful in business, I started to give it away. When I went into business, I was dead broke. I was unemployed. My unemployment insurance ran out. It was 1982. Jimmy Carter just got out of the White House. The economy was abysmal. The operative word in America was malaise. Interest rates were 21, 22% prime rate. Mortgages were 18%. Unemployment was 15%. And my wife says, get a job. And I say, there are no jobs. I'm going to make one. And I went into business. I was dead broke. When I tell you dead broke, I had less than $500 in the bank and my mortgage payments were due. I never turned around. I never looked back. I went straight ahead. And within 5 years, I was donating $100,000 a year to charity. I read a marketing study when I went into business that said went into the security alarm business. It had nothing to do with being a police officer. It's the fact that there was recurring revenue in that business. And there was a marketing study I read that said if you can install 2 systems a week for 10 years, you can earn $1 million. I did it in 4. Surprised the hell out of me, but I did it right. And not only that, I was supporting 24 families because I put 24 people on my payroll.
Great. Now, I want to stop you again, Michael, because I want to talk a little bit about how you develop your books and basically how readers get engaged, because you engaged me, and I just said it about the particular book about your father, but it is very difficult to get people engaged, especially in these times where people are thinking about politics and they're thinking about our president and what's going on in all the countries in the world. And it's so difficult to really get engaged. So I want to know how you keep them engaged.
Well, it's a lot easier to keep them engaged, believe it or not, with a novel, which is what I love writing. I've written 2 novels. I've got a 3rd one. Hopefully it'll be out by this summer. Keeping them engaged is easy. I find it easy. And the way you keep them engaged is you got to hit them right between the eyes with the first opening paragraph of any book. I mean, you really have to let them know where it comes from. My first novel was The Conversion Prophecy, was the Islamic takeover of the world without firing a shot, political expose similar to the Manchurian Candidate. And if I didn't get them engaged, if I didn't get my readers engaged within the first page or 2, then the book wasn't worth it. And that's how I judge it. I have people who I don't know who, usually a book club, and I'll give them the first chapter and say, read this, tell me what you think. Well, and then I get comments like, well, what's going to happen next? I say, see, then I know that they want to read more. So that's basically it.
Yeah. Today, as you listen to what you're talking about with regard to your books, again, I want to mention that it's just a coincidence probably that a lot of the books really resonate today. And it's so important to really keep your people engaged. But what about believable? How do you make your stories believable? Because it just sounds like it's happening today.
Well, believability is easy if you as long as you edit it properly. For example, when writing a novel, the first thing you have to do is you got to suspend disbelief. It's the suspension of disbelief is extremely important. I can't write that the snowplows are moving down Rodeo Drive in Los Angeles, pushing aside a 20-inch snowfall in the middle of August. Nobody's ever going to believe that. Unless my book is science fiction and deals with the world being upside down and everything's changed, that it's now cold in California and it's beautiful in the Northeast in the middle of the winter. So, unless you're trying to prove that, you can't say those things. The suspension of disbelief, or the lack of suspension of disbelief, is prevalent in Hollywood. If any of your listeners remember the movie San Andreas, the heroine was on the roof of a building that was collapsing from a 9.5 magnitude earthquake. She's bloody with her lip cut open, blood dirt all over her face. She claws her way up over the moving slab of concrete, lost her shoes, dropped her purse, her cell phone's gone. And all of a sudden, a helicopter hovers overhead, flown by her ex-husband. She climbs on board. And 3 seconds later, the camera zooms in on her sitting in this helicopter. Her hair is perfect, like she just came out of a hair salon. She's got a perfect manicure. She's holding her cell phone. She's wearing her Jimmy Choos. And she's talking to her daughter who's trapped in a car underwater in a garage, and all the cell phone towers are down. And you got to scratch yourself and you got to say, wait a minute, this is supposed to be believable. you're a trapped audience because you're in a movie theater. You already bought the popcorn. Where are you going to go? So you watch on and you hope this thing gets itself straightened out. You can't write that in a book because the reader is going to put that down and say, my God, I'm not going to pick it up again.
Mhm.
And the other thing I do is I physically write the book in a way that keeps people reading. For example, all my chapters are under 5 pages. Some of them may be 2 pages, some may be 1 page, and there's a reason for it. If you've ever read a book and you want to read a little bit more, what have you done? You've looked at the next chapter and you've counted the pages in it, and you find out it's got 42 pages in the next chapter. You're going to say, oh my God, I want to go to sleep. I'm not going to read the rest of this book. So what do? You put it down. You will never pick it up again. I want my readers to finish my books once they start them. So that's another thing you have to do. You keep your chapters short, and I keep my readers in suspense by trying to throw a red herring or a question that has to be answered in the next chapter or two at the end of a chapter, so that they want to read on to find out what's going to happen next. So that's the suspenseful part, and that's what keeps them going.
Yeah, but now here's the thing. A lot of people today are reading books online. Are your books online?
My books are everywhere.
Okay.
You can get my books are in hardcover, paperback, and are also ebooks, mostly on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and other major booksellers. So that's basically what it is, and it's the way I keep my readers engaged too.
Yeah, and how do you publicize your books? Because a lot of people, there's so many books. I mean, go to Barnes and Nobles, go to Amazon. It just seems like there are millions of books around. So how does Michael Solomon find an audience for his books?
Well, I do a lot of social media advertising. I also do advertising right on Amazon. My publisher, matter of fact, if you go to my latest book under the Divi tree and you go to Amazon, you'll see what my publisher's written there. So all kinds of engagement stuff. And I just try to keep people engaged. I do word of mouth, and I do a lot of book signings, and I spread it out. As a matter of fact, I just wrote another book that's being released this week. It just hit the bookstores today. It's another business book, and I'm having a major launch on Friday with hopefully 150 people in the audience. And we're going to, and that hopefully is going to start the ball rolling, and we just hope it works.
Now
So,
let's
yeah.
talk about your fiction, because you just mentioned Under the Divi Tree. What came to your mind when you were thinking about writing that book?
Well, I wrote that book. Basically, it's a romance novel entwined around a medical mystery. And oddly enough, is when I was doing a rewrite, I had changed one of the characters in the book completely. The character was a mosquito. It sounds crazy, but it was a mosquito. I changed it to a bee, and there was a reason for it, because there was something in honey that's an enzyme that can affect the person's sleep balance. And I said, gee, maybe it comes from an enzyme from a bee. So instead of this guy being bit by a mosquito, let's have him bit by a honeybee. And so I found that out later on. So that's some of the things you do. But I try to keep my readers engaged by letting them try to feel what my protagonists or my characters are feeling. And it's different. For example, if I wanted to describe loneliness, how do you want to describe loneliness? You try to describe it in a way that you believe people may have felt it. So I would write it this way. The room contained 40 people. As I walked amongst the crowd, no one looked my way. It didn't matter that I was the guest of honor. They were there for free drinks, free food, and a good time. I started to believe that other than my hosts, no one cared. I could have been invisible, the wallpaper, it wouldn't have mattered. That's how I would describe loneliness. Sadness would be, my face is stained with salt water that ran from my eyes. There is an emptiness in my soul. My tears can no longer run. They have completely dried up. If you listen closely, you can hear the echo in my heart. I mean, that's sadness. And if I wanted you to feel anxiety and pain, I only have to mention 2 words: root canal.
Okay.
Or if I want you to feel empty and irritable, I only need to describe it in 1 word: colonoscopy. So
That's another one. Yeah.
So that it sounds silly, but it works, and the reader looks at it and they can feel it. So how many readers over the age of 50 have had a colonoscopy, or how many people have had teeth problems where they've had root canal. So they can feel the anxiety and the pain, and I try to get that,
Yeah.
And apparently it works because I'm selling books.
Yeah, and there's no question about it. Now, the interesting thing is that a lot of policemen write books as well. And there must be a reason for that. In fact, I can't even think of the author's name, but he was so successful with his books as you are. And the thing about what he did was he gave people the feeling that they can have feelings. Feelings are very important. Look at today. I know I'm getting away from your books, but you go up to the first person, the second person, the third person, and they feel so sorry for the people in Ukraine. It's unbelievable. Are you going to write a book about what's going on today with regard to our president, with regard to what's happening? Because this hasn't happened for a long time, Michael.
Well, you know me, Susan. I lecture on global climate change all over the world. And as far as I'm concerned, and as far as a lot of major scientists in this world are concerned, it's the biggest hoax known to mankind. It's all about the money. When you see somebody like Al Gore, who earns almost $220 million a year selling carbon credits and other green energy investments, you got to scratch your head and say, why? Because as a police officer, as a detective, we used to start all our cases by following the money. But, getting back to what you say about policemen writing and such, it's best plot in the world is not going to grip the reader if your characters aren't compelling. And where do I find compelling characters? I find them in places I know. I mean, when I was a police officer, a detective, I went into houses that I would never otherwise venture into and gained firsthand experience of life in families, which was polar opposite to my own. When a character in my novel as a work of fiction, they're made all the more vivid by the encounters I've had over the years. And I try to describe them and I try to relate back to them. It's often said that writers write what they know, but the advice is very limiting. Imagine how few books there would be or how dull they would be if authors only wrote about their own lives. You can't do that, So the advice must be taken. If anybody wants to be a writer out there in a broader sense, writers have to write about what they understand.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a detective, I saw human nature in its rawest. I sat with people who had lost spouses to suicide, a single mother who lost a 14-year-old gifted son to a senseless murder when he was stabbed to death in a subway robbery that had only netted 5 cents. I'll never forget the look on that mother's face when I told her son was murdered. To this day, I cringe inside when I think about it. But those are the feelings that I try to evoke and try to get them out there.
Yeah.
I've made cups of tea for elderly couples whose houses have been ransacked. I interviewed countless victims of crimes, and numerous offenders, and have learned how people behave in moments of high stress and anxiety and despair.
Yeah.
So, I try to, over the years, and, my central characters in most of my novels are ordinary people who have been placed in extraordinary situations.
Yeah. It's very interesting that you talk about that, because one of the things that I'm going to ask you is that when you write your book, isn't it a very lonely, isolated feeling to be alone writing a book?
No, because my characters are dancing around my head. Somebody said to me once, they said to me, do you ever get writer's block? I said, yeah. He said, what do you do about it? I said, well, to be honest with you, writer's block is when my characters stop talking to me.
So do you have any?
He said, well, what do you do? I said, I give them time. They come around.
Yeah. So you wake up in the middle of the night and you think about something, it's rolling in your head and you're thinking about it. Do you get up and start writing?
I used to keep a pad and a pencil next to on my nightstand. And if something came to me in the middle of the night, I'd jump up and write it down. I've done that for a while, and then I stopped, and I realized that if it's that important and it makes that much of an impact on me, I will remember it in the morning. If I don't remember it in the morning and I had to write it down, it's not worth writing about. That's the way I look at it, because if it was that easy, that simple, and it's just a fleeting moment and it just took off, it does it. I used to ride around with a little tape recorder in my car. I'd be hearing something on the radio and I'd say, ooh, that's interesting. I mean, talk about that later on. And that's basically it. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of authors have editors. It's funny, when I wrote Conspiracy on the Arabs taking over the world, one of the things I talked about was I had 200 people for dinner in a room that was 30-foot square without even realizing it. And I'm saying, how can you put 200 people in a 30 by 30 room for dinner? Where do you put the tables? Where do you put the chairs? And and I didn't realize. So I had to suddenly change the dimensions of it, and I re-described it. But I like to describe my characters, and I like to describe the setting because I want people to actually feel that they're there. So when a character walks into a room, I describe what he's wearing, not in every detail, but and just describe the room he's in, so that the reader can actually feel it, or hopefully in their mind describe what it is. I like to use my book as a canvas. My book is an easel, and basically like a palette of paint. And my reader's mind is the paintbrush, and they can, they should feel it and be able to paint the picture that they want to see.
Yeah. Something, Michael, today people are doing everything digitally. Are our libraries, do you have your books in our libraries? Because I'm just wondering if people go to libraries anymore, or if they do, they get online. So what do you suggest is the best way to get a book like yours?
Usually at any of your favorite booksellers. It doesn't have to be Amazon.com, but Amazon's the fastest. You can order my book today and have it tomorrow. Or if you've got an ebook, you can order it now and read it within 10 minutes, you're reading it. So that's basically it. Oddly enough, people don't realize is all the books that are in bookstores, they're there on consignment. Barnes & Noble carries my book, and they get 10,000 copies in Barnes & Noble. That book is on consignment. If Barnes & Noble doesn't sell them, they send them back, get a full refund. They don't pay for them in advance. They're sitting there on consignment. So, you want to get them sold. So how do I get them sold in Barnes & Noble? I start trying to do book appearances and book talks in some of the stores. And then the word gets out from one Barnes & Noble to another. And that's basically it. You can't do a book talk on Amazon. It doesn't work that way. So hopefully you can do it that way.
All right. So, Michael, there are young people out there who love to write, but they don't have the experience that you have, how they get involved and how they get their books out there, because you know better than anyone how you do that.
Well, basically, if you really want to tell a story, just sit down and write. I don't care if you take a pad and a pencil and you write it out that way, you write it in a book, a spiral binder, or you sit at your computer and type and write it out. Just write it. Don't worry about structure. Don't worry about grammar. Get the words on paper and just keep writing. Worry about building chapters and building stuff later on when you do rewrites. Don't try to edit it as you're writing, because that's just going to bog you down and saying, oh my God, I don't like the way it sounds. I got to change it. And you're never going to finish what you're writing. So just go ahead and do it. Well, I've been very fortunate. As I said, it took me 4.5 years to get out of high school. And the only courses that I took in high school, to me, that really helped me today is typing. I took 1.5 years of typing. I could touch type close to 100 words a minute. I sit at my computer and my fingers move. I don't even look at the screen. And my wife has walked in my office at times, and she just Mona's looked at me and said, oh my God, how do you do that? I'm saying she could touch type also, but she's certainly, maybe 30, 40 words a minute. But I'm sitting there knocking out 80, 90 words a minute, and the thoughts just keep flowing. And as a matter of fact, she walks in, if she sees me in the middle of a sentence, she doesn't say anything because she knows my thought waves are going. So I do that. And I have to be honest with you. When I wrote The Conversion Prophecy, I wanted to write it with James Patterson as a co-author. And I met with him briefly one morning, and we discussed it. And his advice to me was just keep writing. I sort of got the feeling that he might have been putting me off. But I didn't feel bad about it. I took his advice, like I'm giving people now, just keep writing.
Yeah.
Well, what happened with The Conversion Prophecy was this. The book won 3 national literary awards. I won the Reader's Choice Award. And the book has been written for the Hollywood screen. I was fortunate enough to write it with a producer who wrote Blindside, Sum of All Fears, and Salt. And we wrote it together. And then the Under the Dibby Tree, which was a romance novel wrapped around a medical mystery, that's only been out about 6 months, but that's getting rave reviews. it's also been written for the Hollywood screen, and I'm having a meeting in about 2 weeks with somebody from. I'm having a lunch meeting with somebody from Netflix, and we're hoping that goes because it's already the screenplays have already been written. And because of my police background and everything else, I wrote an episode for Law and Order SVU. It hasn't been produced yet, but we're hoping the right people are reading it right now, so we're hoping that goes. But if you want to be a writer, just write. I mean, don't worry about grammar or anything else. You know, it's funny. When I lecture at colleges, such or if I taught a class, I would get papers. I would tell students, I don't want to see OMGs and oh my gods and all that stuff in your research papers. Those words are not words. You know, I said to my granddaughter once, I says, whatever happened to the word much? She says, what do you mean? I says, why is today everything so fun? When I went to the circus, it was so much fun.
Right.
Where did the verbs go?
Well, we need people like you to teach kids how to write.
Well, it's not only that, political correctness, because today, little Mary in an English class in school who does not know how to grammatically correct a sentence, the teacher will look at it and say, it's okay, Mary, because that's your writing style. Nobody knows how to write a complete sentence today. When I was in school, you had to write a complete sentence from beginning to end. I took a course in college. It's God's honest truth. I took a course in college in creative writing and reading. And that's not how I became a writer. It just happened to be a course I took. And the final exam, I'll never forget it. The final exam, the professor wrote the word had, H-A-D, on the blackboard 13 times. And the question was very simple: grammatically correct that sentence.
Well, that leads to me to asking,
right place and everything else.
Yeah, well, that leads me to asking you what's on the horizons for you, because as I listen to you, you're just so interested in writing and telling stories, which is so important because people like that kind of thing. So what's on the horizons for you, Michael?
Well, I just about finished with about almost, I would say, more than 3/4 of the way finished with a novel I've been writing for about a year now. I put it on a back burner for a while to write something else, and then I just brought it back up again, and I've been finishing it. And it's a erotic murder mystery.
Well, that's sex sells, you know that.
Well, that's why I found that out. It's an erotic murder mystery. And oddly enough, because of my background in law enforcement, I discovered, I tried to find a poison that I'm not going to give away the plot, but a poison that the victim gets poisoned with that cannot be detected in an autopsy. And I found one. It can be detected, but it would cost about $30,000 in special laboratory tests to do it. And no municipality, unless it was some high official somewhere, would spend that kind of money on the death of some guy who was just a professor at a school somewhere, because that's what the victim is. So, that's basically it. And it's a crazy story. And I found a poison, and it's amazing because people say to me, I didn't know that was poison. I said, oh yeah, it is. I said, and I also found a way that the victim can deliver it to himself and not even know it.
Yeah. There's one thing that I left out. Are you self-published, or are you published by a major company?
I'm published by a small house. Where I was published by Green Dragon Books, and I'm now published by Book Locker. If you self-publish, you have more control over your book than you do otherwise. You can do anything you want with it, but I basically like to have somebody behind me. I have an editor who I pay if I need one. Although there's so many programs out there to do self-editing, it's easy. It's not hard to edit a book. It's really not hard. It's easy with programs today like Grammarly or the others. You can edit the grammar of a book in no time. I search for things that always become repetitive in a book. If I had a manuscript of 300 pages, the first thing I would do is I would take all the word, I would look for the word that, T-H-A-T, and remove it. It doesn't belong. It doesn't make sense. For example, every time you read a book, if you read a sentence that said, Mary said that she was going to do this and that and everything, it doesn't make sense. You can say, I like that. It's nice. or you could say, that's nice, comma. I like it. But the word that gets bogging down. And the word like, another word is like. If you try to describe something as, oh, it was, I was going to the beach and it was like being in the sunshine all day long. And the waves were like, people, it's repetitive, and sometimes it'll drive the reader crazy. Sometimes you need it, but you got to use it in different ways. So,
yeah. So, Michael, are you going to appear anywhere here in Florida where you live and where I reside? Any gigs coming up?
Well, I have my business book, which is Mental Acuity, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Shaping Your Mind for Greater Success. And success is spelled with a $ instead of an S, which is cute. I'm launching that book, believe it or not, this Friday at the Leadership Business Council in Palm Beach. And I'm doing a talk on the book, and hopefully there's going to be about 100, 150 people there. But I'm launching that this Friday. If anybody's interested, go to leadershipbusinesscouncil.com, Palm Beach, and they can attend the breakfast. They could just register, and they could, if they want to hear a great business talk about entrepreneurship, that's where I'll be.
Well, my guest today has been Michael Solomon, who's a really notable writer, and he has a great life because he's found something that he is absolutely in love with, and that is his books, writing his books. So thank you, Michael Solomon, for being on the Susan Brender Show. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, you can get my books at any of your favorite booksellers, Amazon.com. If you want, you can go to my website, michaelsolomonbooks.com, and they're listed there. And you can order them through my book site, which will actually bring you to Amazon. And that's basically it. I also do public appearances. So if anybody has a book group or anything else they would like me to speak at, it'd be my pleasure.